Because whether you lead one person at a time or 20,000 people at a time doesn't really matter. It really just matters, are you there helping someone right now? Are you making the world a little bit better by your influence, or are you not?
Yeah. Chris Shaw, welcome. Welcome to the City Serve Leadership Podcast. I know that you and I have been discovering each other for a while now, and you're my friend. And so I'm doing an interview with my friend today. But there's also some things that we look at things differently as when it comes to spiritual things. And I just want to upfront say this is not going to be a discussion about theological issues today. I mean, we may have that someplace down the road, but it's a leadership podcast, and I really wanted to focus on leadership today because I think there's some things that you as a leader will bring into the conversation that I wouldn't necessarily think about, and other people wouldn't either, because you've been a leader for a long time. You probably were a leader at 8 years old or something like that, where somebody said, Chris, you're a leader. You need to be a leader. But you have operated in that role for a long time. And I just want to look at some of the different aspects of leadership that you have discovered that you bring into your life and your practice and all that stuff. So Chris is a physician too. And so one of the things I learned early on about you is that your life is your life no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing. And that's one of the things I love about you, Chris, is you don't try to shift things around. So let's talk about leadership. First of all, maybe could you share a little bit of background about who you are and where you came from and that kind of stuff?
So mostly grew up in Arizona. Went on a mission when I was 19 to the West Indies. So I was in Barbados and St. Vincent and Trinidad for 2 years. They say that they speak English there, but I'm not quite so sure. It was the greatest opportunity in my whole entire life up to that point. Because I grew up in Scottsdale, which is kind of a, posh and ritzy place.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful to be able to go where people are so much happier with so much less and be able to understand, hey, this isn't about stuff. It's about joy. It's about service. It's about loving other people.
Right.
And then being able to see the change in other people as they come unto Christ. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
And
how old were you then?
19, 21. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I came back home, went to BYU, met my sweetheart, and we got married 2 years later. And then went to medical school in University of Arizona down in Tucson, then residency in Ohio, and then moved out here. And it has been great. We've been here for 20 years now, almost. In July, it'll be 20 years.
Wow. You're a huge benefit to this community, Chris. I mean, having a physician who's happy in Longview, who feels like Longview is home and not just a stepping stone to something else, that's a huge benefit for us as a community. So thank you.
I love it here.
Yeah. So how would you define leadership? What is a leader to you? What makes a leader?
So I would say that everyone is a leader in some way or other.
Yeah.
It's really important to go ahead and make sure that you understand that no matter who you are or what is that you're doing, there's someone who is going to go ahead and be better or worse, depending on what choices you make. If we can go ahead and, for me, if I can go ahead and make sure that I am making choices of what I say, what I do, how I act, that sets a good example, then it doesn't really matter what my official leadership callings are. I'm going to be going and doing the Lord's work. But if I'm, trying to go ahead and pull a fast one, whether someone catches me or not, it doesn't really make a difference because it's putting me either further or closer to our Heavenly Father and those around me. Again,
so you're tying leadership really closely to actions.
Actions, and it's not even so much actions so much as what you become by those actions. So which is the next step, so if you do right things but just so you can show everybody how fancy you are,
right,
I'm not sure it goes and helps you to become the person that you would become if you were doing right things because you love to do those right things, or because you want to go and serve Heavenly Father.
John Wimber, who was a person I learned a lot of my beliefs from early on, used to say, you'll know that you are a leader if you turn around and look around over your shoulder and somebody's following you. But if nobody's following you, are you really a leader? And so I've always thought, you need to be a little self-aware if you're a leader. Does anybody pay attention to what I say? Am I mentoring people? Am I helping people grow? Or am I just talking a lot and assuming that my voice is an expression of my leadership, and irregardless of anybody's following me or not? No. I think we need to be aware of the people around us, because like you when I first met you, you took an interest in me. You paid attention to who I was, not just because I was I was sitting in front of you, but because you seemed to ask questions you wanted to know who I was, what kind of a person I was. And I assume that part of that was because you were wondering how you could help me, be there for me, strengthen me.
It's just because I liked you.
Well, yeah, I like ice cream too, but it just seems like leaders have this thing where they are really aware of who they are around other people, and they don't try to pretend, but they have this thing inside of them that wants to serve. Good leaders, I think, are the best leaders are people who want to serve other people, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And it's an interesting thing, going in and seeing lots of different types of leaders in business.
Yeah.
Particularly, you see different components of leadership, some that are good and some that are, maybe not quite as you would hope.
Yeah.
And so when you see that and you're thinking, well, right, how do I want to go ahead and have my influence be? Do I want to be the one to, be the bad example? Do I want to be the one who leads people to do things that make them worse?
Yeah.
Or do I want to be the one to, make things better, whether I have, an assignment to do that or not?
Right. So what kind of leaders are you drawn to?
Truthfully,
yeah,
one of the things I really love doing is just stuff that's really fun and joyful. And it's funny because you can go and be picking up trash at the park, and it can be the greatest thing you did all week.
Yeah.
Even though the act itself is not terribly fun, it's the environment with which you do it in, So if you're there working with a bunch of other like-minded people, particularly if you sit in, there's pizza at the end, or if there's, so we get to go and play when we're done. That's, I think, probably the one that helps me the most. The other thing that really helps a lot is when you've got somebody who will show you love and will go and accept the love that you send back. That also really goes and engenders a feeling of, hey, I would love to go ahead and continue to build on that. Yeah. Giving and taking, friendship and joy and laughter together. That's, I think, what really makes it. And whatever it is you're doing, that engenders those kinds of, feelings of the spirit there.
Yeah.
Really goes and helps to make it so that I want to go and follow this. I want to go ahead and, continue to be like that person. And
so are you describing the mentors in your life?
Oh, sure. There's lots of them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They were real people.
Oh, yeah.
Who let you see who they were and wanted to know who you were. Mm-hmm. See, to me, that's like friendship. Like that's allowing yourself to be vulnerable enough to be a friend to somebody. Mm-hmm. There are some leaders that I've had that weren't really friends. They were just like people who I was inspired by, people who I listened to them and the way they think and the way they talk, and I thought, I want to be like them. Mm-hmm. And even people I've never even met personally, but I've been inspired by them. I think those people have been leaders in my life, and especially now that we have YouTube, I have access to the best leaders in the world.
Yeah.
Which is astounding that we're privileged enough to have connection with those people now, because sometimes I just listen to some of these people and I'm like, I'm learning so much. Keep feeding me. Keep feeding me. I don't know if that's true for you or not.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, just as you were talking, you know, and you're talking about YouTube, I was thinking about all these different people where, you know, like Rabbi Jonathan Sacks from England.
Yeah.
And Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu over down there from South Africa. C.S. Lewis. There's all these different people who have so many different insights into, you know, how to be a better person, how to, you know, that it's just really an amazing thing to go ahead and be able to have this enormous wealth of good advice that, you know, brings you closer to Heavenly Father.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really important to see things through other people's eyes, because I can be pretty narrow-minded and, you know, my focus be pretty narrow. I really enjoy seeing things differently. And you've helped me with that. I mean, we've had some conversations even about our own belief systems, which really I've enjoyed that adventure, Chris. For those of you who don't know, Chris is a Latter-day Saint. So we've had some really good exchanges where you have patiently and thoughtfully try to communicate with me some of the ways that you think and the way that you believe, and I've really enjoyed it. I don't know. I think sometimes this whole idea that we all have to think the same and believe the same is a rather, little too narrow, a little too shallow sometimes. I like to be challenged by the way people that think differently express that, and I've really enjoyed that from you. I don't know if that's something that you enjoy as well. But
it's been so fun, you know. And like you said, it's so tempting to be like, okay, I know what I know, and everybody else, you know, is wrong, or everybody else is. But to go ahead and not only learn from somebody else, but to go ahead and say, wow, I really admire this about what you believe, and from our discussions, and from, you know, and even more than our discussions, just your example of that you set for me to really has been like, wow, I am so excited to go ahead and follow that example to be, you know, more like you and more like, and by that, you know, because of your example and your walk with Christ, to help me be closer to him too.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Chris. So what have you taught? I know that most of this you've taught by example, but what have you told your children about leadership? How have you tried to frame up leadership for your kids? You have kids.
Yeah, I've got 5 kids. Yeah. And so they're 16 to 25 right now. And so it's a whole different game than it was when they were small.
Yeah.
Because when they're small and you're like, hey, listen, don't put that in your mouth. When they're small, they're trying to explode themselves on a somewhat regular basis. Now that they're older, it's a much more challenging, but much more rewarding to go ahead and talk about leadership, because when they're little, coercion may not quite be the right word, but listen, if the boy is teasing the little sister, you take whatever it is away, and they can't tease with something that they don't have. As they get older, the whole idea that I'm going to go and control these decisions, well, it kind of goes away, because as you try to go, because you got influence and you got control.
Right.
All right. And as they get older, the illusion of control is much more transparent.
Yeah, yeah.
And so all you now have is influence. And if you try to squeeze, if you try to go ahead and guilt, or you try to punish, or you try to ground, or you try to go ahead and, you know, coerce them to do what you want them to do, well, your control diminishes, but even worse, your influence diminishes. And so you're not...
You get wiser, too.
Oh, yeah.
Like when you're a young parent, you're just trying to... I mean, this was my experience. I was just trying to put as much in them as I could. Yeah. And like, to me, it was like putting seeds in them and seeds in them. Yeah. And now that they're older, I know the seeds that are in them, and I'm trying to help those seeds flourish. I'm going to help grow those. I know that one of the things I feel like I've taught my kids is they can do anything. So now I tap into that in them and say, listen, I don't know why you think that you can't do this, but I know you can.
Yeah.
Because I know that there's enough in you that can help you grow and expand your knowledge that you can really do this, you guys. And so I think this is one of the benefits of getting a little bit older and wiser is that we realize that we've made a difference in our kids.
Right.
And there's stuff in them that's yet to come out.
Yeah.
And so when they have kids, it starts coming out. When they change jobs, it starts coming out. When they take a risk, it starts coming out.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that in your children?
Oh,
too?
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to go ahead and see how much better they are than I was, at that age and even now.
Yeah.
It's so fun to go ahead and be able to admire and love these kids, not just because I have to, because they're my kids,
Right.
but because I really, really, really love the person they've become. And the gifts that the Lord's given them has been so beautiful to go ahead and see that as they grow.
Yeah, that's awesome. So where would you say, I know this is a really, 30,000 foot view, but what would you say is the state of leadership in the United States right now?
Well,
It's kind of a quagmire, but
yeah, I would say people are trying to go ahead and lead from coercion, from intimidation,
power struggles.
Yeah. And the problem with that is even if you get people to do good things, if you coerce someone to do righteousness, it's not really righteousness.
Yeah.
Most of the time, though, is by doing that, you kind of evaporate the Lord's influence, because the Lord doesn't usually force us to do things.
Right.
He goes and says, here's what your options are. I'd like you to go ahead and do this option. I heard where in Isaiah, he talks about that the Lord's hand is extended still.
Yeah.
He's got two hands, one in the hand of mercy, one in the hand of consequences.
Right.
And it's our choice which of those hands we want to grasp.
Yeah.
But but when we try to go ahead and force other people to go ahead and do things that we think that they should do, it doesn't really work out very well. And I think that's probably the big issue. And then when we see all the, trouble and turmoil that's going on in the world, it's because of that. They don't have a good example to say, hey, here's what I do, here's why I do it, and this is the thinking behind that. I'd like it if you would do that too.
Yeah.
They're like, nope, I'm going to go ahead and legislate, or I'm going to go ahead and, take so that I can go and implement your choices for you.
Yeah. It's really confusing to people, I think. It's interesting you say that about the two hands, because I learned something recently. The portrait that Rembrandt did of the Return of the Prodigal Son, in that portrait, the father has his hands around the prodigal, and his prodigal has his back in the portrait to the viewer. And the hands are different. The hands of the father are different. One hand is a very masculine hand, which would be the discipline, and the other hand is a feminine hand, which is just, you would never notice it, except that Henry Nouwen sat before that painting for almost 2 days and just looked at it and noticed the details of it. And he said that the father was demonstrating not just the discipline, but also the compassion and empathy to the son. He had both.
Yeah.
And it was a great demonstration of what leadership really is, the best leadership is like.
Right.
You can do both. You don't have to be one or the other. My wife and I, when we were raising kids, one of us was usually the disciplinary and one was the compassionate person. We changed roles every once in a while to confuse the kids. Yeah. But, it's just good to have both. And I think some leaders tend to gravitate towards one or the other. And it'd be nice to have some balance in leadership. And I think the church has the ability to bring that to the table. I think that we can be very balanced in the way we approach people.
Right.
We can be disciplinarians, and we can have the contents and structure can be important, but we can also be compassionate and show grace to people, which is really important component, I think.
Yeah. And, the prodigal son's a really great example of the way the Lord oftentimes will do. It would be tempting, if you were the dad, to be like, seriously, you knucklehead? You go in there in the pigsty and you grab him by the ear and you drag him back home and say, this is the decision you're making? he had to wait.
He waited for
as
a long
hard
time.
as that would have been to pray. But, from a long way off, he saw him coming.
Yeah.
He'd been waiting and he'd been watching. And finally up over the hill, and went running to him. That's not what dads did in those days. They didn't run. That was in signs of great emotion. It's the only time you ran. The house is on fire,
Right.
The baby's being born, or your boy's come home.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like being a physician has allowed you to be a leader in a way that you couldn't have been any other way?
Mm-hmm. Unquestionably.
In what way?
Well, the thing that's so great about doctoring is that you do it one person at a time.
Yeah.
You don't go ahead and, have 5,000 people and now everybody go ahead and say, "Ah." It's just one person at a time.
Yeah.
And so it's really wonderful to be able to say, okay, right now I have one person in front of me. I got a whole bunch of other crazies going on behind me, but right now I have one person in front of me.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go ahead and do what I can to listen, to understand, and to help right now, right here. And it's really helped me to be a lot more present, I
Right.
think, than if I was up, writing in my office and never there going and hearing about people's divorces and not really hearing about, the pain that people are going through. And so I think that's really helped me a lot to be able to go ahead, because whether you lead one person at a time or 20,000 people at a time doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
It really just matters, are you there helping someone right now? Are you making the world a little bit better by your influence, or are you not?
Yeah. I think that there's a similarity between that and what Jesus did while he walked on the earth.
Mm-hmm.
He just paid attention to what was right in front of him. A lot of times it frustrated everyone around him that he was kind of fixated on this one guy that was blind. He was taking mud and putting it in his eye. And what a remarkable exchange between that person and himself. I think that you're right where God wants you, as far as being a physician. You're right where he wants you, because you get to use your faith to do your job.
You have to.
And I think most of the people who realize that they can be a leader right where they're at and take responsibility for that and don't shrink back from that, but think, I guess it does make a difference that I am who I am right where I'm at,
Right.
are the best people to be around.
Right.
And I'm really glad you're doing what you're doing, Chris. I'm glad that I'm really grateful for our friendship, and I look forward to what the Lord has us doing together. It's been a joy walking with you. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you too. It's a fun thing. It's fun to be able to understand people, and as you understand them, you become to love them more than you ever considered.
Yeah.
And that you find that it's so much easier to go ahead and have friends in places you never would have thought so.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the greatest thing to be able to do here in Longview.
Well, thank you for sitting down today and
Sure.
having this conversation. I really appreciate it. You're great.
Well, you are great too. Thank you.
Thanks.